You know, sometimes I'm here and we talk about some bad things that happen and some bad people that do bad things. And sometimes we just talk about some bad situations. And this is the latter. It's really a tragedy in many respects. It's a bad situation. And it really shows, I think, where we are in this country, where we are in this community today when it comes to the drug problem and how life, unfortunately, has become devalued to the extent that it has because of drugs and the effect that it's had on individuals. I think you'll see what I'm talking about as I go through this sequence of events that happen. The people we're here to talk about today is a deceased woman by the name of Jillian Tully. She's a white female. Her date of birth, October 4th, 1993, and she's 30 years old. And two other people, John Yeckley, he's a white male. Date of birth is February 7th, 1967. He's 56 years old. And Michael Sloan, a white male, July 27th, 1981, and he's 42 years old. This past Monday morning, on January 8th, in the early morning hours, 10 o'clock or so, deputies responded to the report of a dead body in the alley just south of 3564 52nd Avenue North in St. Petersburg. When deputies got there, they found Jillian Tully deceased on the ground. The photograph of her where she was found, and I'll explain this, are here to my right. She had been wrapped in a sheet, and there had been a cardboard box placed on top of her that was covering her as she laid in that alley. It was obvious to deputies and robbery homicide detectives that responded that her body had been dumped there in the alley and that she had died somewhere else. Of course, given the nature of those circumstances, we initially investigated it as a homicide or a possible homicide because of being wrapped in the sheet and where she was found there in the alley. But after further investigation, including inspection of the body, an autopsy that was conducted, it was determined, and what we believe is that she died from a drug overdose. And it was important, though, even as we determined that it most likely wasn't a homicide, it was a drug overdose, to figure out exactly what happened. And through really just good old-fashioned boots-on-the-ground police work, detectives were able to trace her last known whereabouts to the Gateway Motel located at 4990 34th Street North in St. Pete, which is a few blocks away, a few blocks to the south and the east from where she was found here in the alley. And it really is good old-fashioned boots-on-the-ground police work. What detectives found was an imprint on her leg, and the imprint was there on her leg from a fence. And matching that imprint up to the fence at the motel, took them back to the motel, and also because the sheet that she was wrapped in was a motel-type sheet that probably would have come from a place like the Gateway. So they started putting all that together, went back, traced her whereabouts back to the motel, and then from there we got a bunch of video, and I'll walk you through as to what happened from that point. But what they did learn is that Tully is an unemployed transient. She has no known local address, and again, very sadly was severely addicted to drugs. Tully has an extensive criminal history. You know, there's sometimes I stand up here and talk to you about all these criminal histories that people have, how extensive they are, and it's because of, you know, bad people doing bad things. But that's not the case here. I mean, this is her criminal history. It is long, it's huge. She has an extensive criminal history. But you look at all these charges, it's because she got a substance abuse problem, because she's addicted. And she's not a bad person. She's an addicted person who ended up doing some bad things, and she ended up in trouble and ended up in the system and ended up being transient and having this huge problem. But it's because of addiction. It's because of drug addiction is what caused it. Anyway, through the investigation, detectives learned that she was last seen by anybody other than these two guys, and we'll talk about what happened with Sloan and her interaction with Sloan and with Yeckley. She was last seen on Saturday, the 6th, when someone dropped her off in the 1200 block, I'm sorry, the 800 block of 12th Avenue South in St. Pete. So we were able to find somebody that said they dropped her off down there, and she went down to that area of St. Petersburg to get drugs. We know that she was seen at the Gateway Motel at about midnight Sunday. So between Saturday afternoon and Sunday midnight, we don't know where she was. She's probably just out on the street as she usually was, doing what she does on the street. But she was seen at the Gateway Motel at about midnight. She was invited by Yeckley into room number 2. Yeckley is the maintenance man employed, and he lives there at the Gateway Motel. And the second photo in to my left, as you can see, is identified in there with John Yeckley. He invited her into his room. Yeckley didn't know Tully at all. Just saw her hanging around there. Obviously, she's a transient. She had drugs on her. He wanted to use drugs, so he invited her into his room to give her a place to stay. And she brought crack cocaine and had fentanyl, and they went in there and she started injecting the fentanyl into her arm, and Yeckley started smoking the crack cocaine. Yeckley said he fell asleep, and this is about midnight, a little after midnight, Sunday night into Monday morning. He woke up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and Tully was dead on the floor in his motel room. Yeckley became concerned, as you would say, or as they would say, freaked out, because he had this dead woman on the floor of his room. He had drugs in his room, and as opposed to doing what he should have done, which is to call the police and report it, he went outside and recruited Michael Sloan, who's a local transient, to help him get rid of Tully's body. So they took her out of the motel room, they wrapped her in a sheet, and they put her on the back of Sloan's bike and transported her to the alley, and they dumped her in the alley. So we have video of Yeckley and Sloan loading Tully onto the bike. And why don't we just show you that video now, and then I'll continue with the rest of it. So go ahead, Dave. So we've edited it and we've speeded it up. We've sped it up. The total video is about 9 minutes. We've cut it down to about 2 minutes. They got her wrapped in the sheet on the back of his bike. Then they're taking her down the street. They stop a couple times because her leg's falling off the bike, or the trailer there behind the bike, and they're loading her leg back up. And that's them coming back now. You can see they already went down, they dumped her body, and they're coming back without it. So again, you can stop it there. So what I wanted to do, the whole thing, when you take all the video, and we got the video from the Gateway, we got the video from residents along the street, we put it all together. The total of it's about 9 minutes, but for these purposes, I just wanted to speed it up. You get the gist of it, and you can see that the body was loaded on there. They took her, and then they put her in the alley. So as I said, this is really just a sad situation. It shows how out of control the fentanyl and opioid drug problem is, and in many respects how life has become so devalued to the extent that someone's just dumped in an alley after they were overdosing. But as to these two guys, as to Yeckley and Sloan, just like Tully, they have extensive histories of drug use. And Sloan has a very extensive criminal history. Now, his criminal history is everything from capital sexual battery to possession of fentanyl and cocaine. A lot of it is also related to his drug addiction. Just to illustrate the problem that we face here in Pinellas County, and this really illustrates the problem not just here in Pinellas, but across the region, across the state, across the country, is that in 2022 and 2023, so this is just the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office alone. This doesn't include the St. Petersburg Police Department, Clearwater, Largo, Pinellas Park, all the other agencies in Pinellas County. Is the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office alone in 2022 and 2023 responded to over 1,500 overdose calls here in Pinellas. Since 2020, so it's really the last 3 years, there have been over 1,600 opioid overdose deaths in Pinellas County. So that's an average of 35 to 40 opioid overdose deaths in Pinellas County every single month. One of the things that I describe as in this whole epidemic and this whole problem that we face, something that is a blessing and a curse is Narcan. And Narcan is an opioid antagonist. And the blessing of Narcan is that it reverses the effect of an opioid overdose. And when somebody stops breathing, their heart stops and they're dead, is that as long as it's administered in a short period of time, it literally brings them back from the dead. That's the blessing of it because it saves lives. But the curse is that you got way too many people, and I'll explain here in a second, including these two, that now more recklessly and with impunity use opioids and use fentanyl because they know as long as somebody is around that's got Narcan is that they're not going to die and they can literally come back from the dead. So think about this. I just gave you the numbers and said there are about 35, 40 people a month that die in Pinellas County every single month from an opioid overdose. We responded over a 2-year period, just us, to 1,500 calls. And again, just us, just the Sheriff's Office and Pinellas County EMS. This is not St. Petersburg, this isn't Largo, this isn't Pinellas Park. So just the Sheriff's Office and Pinellas County EMS alone, since 2020, have administered Narcan over 8,000 times. That's an average of about 175 Narcan administrations a month. So if you take those 35 or 40 opioid deaths a month and you add the 175 Narcan administrations a month, if it wasn't for Narcan, we'd have over 200 people a month dying in Pinellas County from fentanyl overdoses. So now let's talk about these guys. On Christmas Day of 2023, a couple weeks ago, deputies got a call to the Gateway Motel because there was a guy who had overdosed and was dead. It was Sloan. Deputies administered Narcan to him. He got up, dusted himself off, and right back at it again. Same thing happened on November 3rd of 2023. So in the last roughly 60 days, he's been brought back from the dead twice with deputies administering Narcan to him. He also had another overdose at the Gateway on June 16th of 2022. Same thing with Yackley on March 3rd of 2021 and December 22nd of 2020. So Yackley and Sloan have been arrested. We charged them with tampering with evidence and improper disposal of a body. So they're in jail. Obviously, Tullys deceased, and it is just really one of those tragic situations that is the culmination of a problem that is not getting any better in the community. These calls remain consistent. The number of people dying on the street remains consistent, 35, 40 a month, 200 Narcan administrations a month. We're responding to these calls every single day, literally. And now to the point where you got a guy that has been brought back from the dead twice in the last 60 days, again, using drugs again, and now takes a body of a woman who died in his motel room as opposed to doing the right thing because he's scared realizes he probably would go to jail for the drugs, et cetera, and he takes her and dumps her in an alley. So that's the situation. That's what happened. That's where we are with it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, I think that this is just one of those really, really tragic situations, and people need to know that there is help out there when they are addicted to these drugs. Hopefully, somebody can get them some help so you don't end up in a situation like she ended up with, wrapped in a sheet and dumped in an alley.
So, thank you for putting a name and a face on a big problem, but if you could wave a magic wand to come up with a solution, whether it be, obviously stopping fentanyl from coming into the state, or having some kind of mandatory treatment for anybody who was administered Narcan, what would you do?
So, at its root cause, all of this is a result of what we call co-occurring disorders, which is mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse. And I think we need to figure out a way as a community, as a state, to do more with these individuals. And the way that I think my experience tells me that the way we do more is we need to be more effective with case management and driving these people into treatment in the right direction. If these people could fix their problems on their own, they would, they can't. Treatment alone is not enough, and treatment resources are not enough. You have to have somebody that it's called navigating them or case managing them and pushing them to the right place with the right types of services, the right amount of services for the right amount of time, and trying to break this cycle. I think that's where we're not doing enough. If I could say and could wave that magic wand and do one thing, Jeff, that's what I would do, is I would put a lot more resources into case management, into navigating these people. The resources are fine, but when they're in and out of these resources on a cycle and nobody's owning them and owning the problem and owning them in a good way, is they're not going to get there. And so then on top of that, then the things that are causing this to the extent that they are that you mentioned is we have, of course, a porous border. You've got fentanyl coming in, you got the importation, but those are all people that are exploiting the addicted people. And it's a supply and demand. As long as there's the demand, they're going to offer the supply because they want to make money off of somebody's back, literally. So the problem is there's so much demand, and there's so much demand because there's so much addiction, because there's so much with mental health issues and problems, and there's not enough of those resources. And in the resource bucket is that, do we have treatment programs? Sure, we've got a lot of treatment programs, a lot of stuff going on, but nobody is case managing these people, navigating these people, owning the problem, and there's too much of being on this hamster wheel and being on this cycle, and so that's what we need more of.
Beyond, the trail you have on her, on Jillian Wright, I mean, beyond that criminal trail, arrest for this, arrest for that, what threads can you pick up on who she is, what agencies had ever seen her, what her life consisted of here in Pinellas County?
Well, we're still looking into that, but like I said, I mean, look at all those charges. I mean, she's just all over the place. Her mom lives here in Largo. She really didn't have much contact with her family, from what I understand. They knew, from what they told our detectives, that her life would end someday because of an overdose. They didn't expect she was going to end being dumped in an alley. So she did have family here, and apparently was just so far gone with the addiction that there was just nothing they could do.
Did she graduate from high school?
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah. See, I don't know all that. I don't have that kind of background.
Is there any chance you have a photo of her?
Yeah, we do, and I think it's a booking photo, so we do have a photo. They can get it for you. PIO can get that to you, because we do have a photo of her, yeah.
It sounds like these two were no strangers to Narcan. Is it possible that she could have been brought back if they had called 911 when? Sure,
because that's what happens. If Yeckley had been awake and saw her because he was smoking the crack cocaine, so she comes into the room, she's got crack and she's got fentanyl. So that was the quid pro quo. I'll give you a place to sleep, you know, you give me some drugs because that's what he does. And so she's shooting up the fentanyl, he's smoking crack, he passes out from the crack, she's got the fentanyl, usual situation, she doesn't know how to use it, it's too potent, all the usual things that happen, she got in her arm, she dies. But yeah, if he had been awake and seen her pass out, and then if he had called 911, then we could have had another Narcan reversal at the Gateway. So sure, and again, that's the, you know, the blessing of the curse of it is it does save lives. There's no question that it reverses the effect of it. But in this case, he was passed out, so.
So there's no charges for him for not rendering aid or anything like that?
No, he's just he's another drug addicted. I mean, the only difference between him and Sloan, so Sloan hangs out at the Gateway. He doesn't have any money for a room, so he kind of just sleeps in the courtyard as a transient. The only difference between Sloan and Yeckley is that Yeckley's got a room there because he acts as a maintenance man. But there's no difference. And again, these guys, and they have extensive criminal histories, but when you look at their criminal histories, that's not what this is about. This is about mental health, addiction, substance abuse, people that are just, their lives are so wrecked because of the drugs and they're so fried that this is what they've become. And then you got a guy is that, you know, he was scared. I get it, it's wrong. He shouldn't have done it. He should have called. But he loaded her body up and wrapped it in a sheet and took it and dumped it in the alley. And, you know, they said they put it in this alley here because they know that there's a lot of people that go up and down that alley, including kids, by the way. They go back and forth to school through that alley. But they knew that she'd be found. They just didn't want to be responsible for it.
When it comes to, you know, these two guys, it's kind of an awkward question to ask, but I mean, they're going to be back out relatively soon.
Sure.
Right, but days, weeks.
And doing the same thing, unless something breaks the cycle, unless they get some sort of services or something happens where something breaks the cycle, they'll be right back at it again, and we'll get a call, and the deputies are going to respond out there, and they're going to administer Narcan to them, and you know, it'll keep going until somebody doesn't, and then they'll be in that situation. You know, they'll be one of those 35 to 40 a month. They'll be one right now, but they're in the, you know, 200 a month of Narcan administrations. And remember, I'll say it again, remember those administrations, there's more than that because, you know, St. Pete, Clearwater, Largo, Pinellas Park, Tarpon, all these other agencies are doing the same thing. So the numbers are pretty high and much higher than even that. So it's bad. It's not a good situation to be in. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.